Have you ever started to feel a bit more confident, so you speed things up and then everything just starts to fall apart? You start overshooting gaps, then end up overcorrecting into a tree, or you're just bouncing around like a freaking pinball. Your drone looks fast, sure, but it sure as hell does not feel smooth. It'll make you wonder if you just weren't cut out to fly fast, like maybe smooth speed was just something you unlock after years of flying, but it's actually not true, and I myself am living proof of this. I took my floats from quote-unquote fast, where I had anything but precise control, to smoothly fast, where I could and still can really crank up the speed dial and keep my drone completely under my own control. In this section, you're going to learn how to unlock that feeling of buttery flow, even while flying fast, and the best part is that you don't need new gear, you don't need crazy skills, or years of sim time. You just need to understand the two simple stages, and that's exactly what we're going to learn now. This first stage actually came from multi-time world champion drone racer Thomas Bitmarder. You may not know his name, but you sure as hell can tell he knows his stuff when you watch through his racing footage. But just before you start to think, yeah, I don't race, so whatever this guy's got to say, it's gonna be irrelevant to me. Listen up. That was my exact mindset for the entire first year that I got into the hobby. I didn't want to race, so I never bothered to listen to any racing advice, and this mindset is what nearly stopped me from flying altogether, as by the end of the year, I'd stopped improving, which had stopped me believing in myself, which in turn stopped me from having fun. Anyways, we're going to tad off track there, but I just need you to understand that just because this advice is coming from a racer, it doesn't mean it's not absolute gold. Because trust me, this advice is game-changing, and better yet, it's one of the most simplistic changes that you can make. I remember being at the end of a race event after having really struggled with my confidence and also my speed. I ended up having a chat with Thomas Bitmarder about it all, who told me that there was one setting that would increase my flight times, build up heaps of real confidence, and help me fly faster. All at the same time. So obviously, I asked what the heck this magical unicorn of a setting was, and that's when he taught me about throttle limits. Now I know that sounds backwards. Limit your throttle to fly faster. But it works because when you lower your top speed temporarily, your brain can finally catch up and get in front of your flying. That lets you get into flow, and of course, as you get better, you can then raise the limit again while keeping full control. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, guess where we are back again? We're back in beta flight. I know, our favorite. Thankfully though, we're not actually going anywhere near. We're going straight back to PID tuning, right back on over to rate profile settings, and then this is where you changed your throttle expo before, so if you've changed that, that'll be in there right now. However, what we're looking at is what's called throttle limit. So for the sake of understanding, I am making sure that my throttle mid and my throttle expo are back at the defaults, which is 0 and 0.5, because that's where our throttle midpoint should be if we have got no throttle expo. Now, what we've got here is throttle limit and throttle limit percentage. And if you look at our stick again, as I move this up, you're going to see 50% equals 50%, 70% is going to equal 70%, and 100% is going to equal to 100%, right? What's going to happen here is we're going to change this over to scale, not clip. I'll show you why not clip in a moment. I'm going to change it to scale, and then I'm going to change this number over here to 80. So you can see this has just dropped our entire throttle curve down to what looks like 80%. You'd guess it right if you guessed that, by the way. Now, you can see as I am now changing my throttle and we go up, 20% is only equal to 16%. And we go up to our 50% mark. Where's that? About 50%. 50% is equal to 40%. And you can see this is all linear, so it doesn't change it doesn't change exponentially like it did with throttle expo. 75% is equal to 60% on the actual drone. And then 101 in this case, 100%, I want to get it there. Come on. Okay, there we go. Oh, for crying out loud. 101% should be 100%, and I cannot get my, there we go. 100% is equal to 80%. So 100% throttle on my remote controller is equal to 80% of my drone. So my drone is only giving out 80%, and it's actually limiting the drone's power to 80%. So you could change this if you're like, holy crap, this drone's like stupid out of control. You could go to 70%. And believe it or not, I have done this with my racing drone. I flew with 70% for the longest time, and I only upped it to 80 sometime, actually no, I think I still fly on 70% throttle with my racing drone. And I still fly reasonably fast with a racing drone. So, throttle limits still get used today by me. Now, you don't want to drop it down too much like 50% because at this point, you're going to literally have to be at 100% throttle on 100% on your stick to get up to 50% throttle on your drone. And there's no extra room to actually move that stick either. So 50% is how much your drone will put out, and it likely won't hover very well at that, or if you are hovering, you're probably at the top of your stick. So the maximum that I'd probably change it down to is 70%, but otherwise, 80% is a pretty sweet number as well. That's something I'd recommend a lot. Something like a tiny whoop, which is a much smaller, less powerful drone, you might only need to go to 90% because it is a much more underpowered drone already. But it depends. If you feel like you're bobbling around heaps, you can absolutely change it down to 80%. It just means when you cut the throttle and you go to catch it again, you're going to have to full throttle for a little bit longer to catch the little tiny whoop. Now, because you're limiting your drone down to, say, 80% of its throttle, you're literally not allowing it to use that top 20%, which means you are basically saving 20% of your battery in a weird sense, not exactly, but you are saving a lot more of your battery by not using that extra boost of power, that full throttle. Like imagine you're driving a car and you drove everywhere with your foot flat, right? You're gonna run out of gas pretty damn quickly. But if you just drove like reasonable, with your foot going reasonably to the ground, but not all the way, you're going to save more gas. It is the exact same with the drone. Then you're probably questioning, how is this going to give me any confidence? It's just going to make my drone fly slower and it's going to make it less responsive. But it gives you less acceleration. So when you're officially boosting around the place, what you're going to find is that, oh, my drone's not getting there as fast as it used to, which gives my brain that little bit of time to catch up with the drone, and therefore, I'm now able to process what I'm about to do. So it takes it off of the in the moment, present, right now thinking to switching it to give yourself that 20% of extra time to process what's about to happen, to process the trick you're about to do, to process whatever gap you're about to go through and actually nail it with thought and intention and confidence rather than being like, okay, well, holy heck, I've just got to control this. Oh, and we're going through the gap now. Great. Whoa. Right. And we crashed. Right. So it's actually helpful to gain confidence. And then because you've got more confidence, you're going to find that you're going to be able to fly faster because your mind is actually in front of your drone and your mind has already thought about what you're doing next. So there's no second guessing if you're going to be able to hit that gap. You already know you're hitting that gap. It's just a matter of how to hit that gap. And you've already thought about that because you've had the time to get there. Now, the reason that we don't want to do this on clip is because if I go to clip, whoa, what the heck's happening here? So, as I move my throttle up now, you're going to see, all the numbers are staying the exact same, right? So, it's 50% on the throttle, is still 50% on my drone, but then you get to 80% here, right? And now anywhere between 80 and 100% doesn't change the actual throttle on my drone whatsoever. So this bit on my throttle stick becomes virtually useless for the entirety of having it on clip. Now, there are reasons to use this, and I don't think that you'll ever need to use this, but there are some reasons. I'm not going to go through them, but they are really for racers who have been flying for years and don't want to change the feeling of their drone at all. So clip is, it's got its purposes, but I don't recommend it. It literally deletes 20% of your usable stick movement. And as you probably know, you want to have more stick movement, which is what scale does. Scale allows you to have more stick movement for slightly less power output. And therefore, it literally gives you more stick movement to play with, which means less jittery controls. It's fantastic. So here's how to change it in the simulators. Okay, so we're with an uncrash. Now this is one of the ones that doesn't quite have a throttle limit easy feature, I guess you can call it. You got to change something a little bit differently. So generally speaking, I would say go to your options, go to your rates, and then woohoo, you'll see it over there. But no, you can see there's only our throttle mid and throttle expo, which is kind of annoying. But if we go to drone settings, you're going to find that there is a low, medium, and high. You can see these are currently all at 1. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to simply bring these down to, say if we're doing 80% throttle limit, we're going to bring these down to 0.8. You do need to adjust them all. So 0.8, 0.8, 0.8. That is now using scale. It is throttling or is limiting your throttle to 80% of its original output while still allowing you to have full resolution on that stick. So it's a slightly different way of doing it here, and there just isn't any other way. I could be wrong, but I haven't been able to find any other way. So motor response under your, here we go, under drone settings, not rates. Okay, within liftoff, you've probably got the hang of this one now. You're going to go to Tools, Workbench, back to your drone editor. So you got to do all your drones individually. Go select the drone that you want to change. And then you can go to Edit Flight Controller Settings here. So click into that. You can see we've currently got this stuff set up. So I'm going to reset this back to how we had it before. And you're going to see here we've got throttle start and throttle end, right? Throttle start, you're going to leave at 0. But throttle end is your throttle limit, your throttle cap. So we're going to change that to 80. And you can see it's done this weird like graph thing here. Right, this thing is made this weird. So like if I change this more, I don't really understand why it does this, but I do know how to change it. So say we're picking 80, right? All you're going to do is come to these arrows here, and you're going to click and hold them down just like this until that line looks pretty much dead straight. So 40 is going to be the point here because your end throttle is 80%, so half of 80 is 40. That's your throttle mid now. If you were to do 70 on this, so say 70%, you'll need to change your mid to 35 because that is half of 70 and it keeps that line straight. So you do need to change both of those settings for this. Yeah, it's slightly painful, especially if you're trying to mix throttle expo and throttle limit, which I do recommend, but you kind of got to play with it a bit more. So if we were to introduce throttle expo in there and do say 30%, then you may need to change your mid down a little bit more, like so. So it's not quite as easy as Betaflight, it's a tad more tacky, but it still works pretty fine. But throttle limits alone aren't going to help you fly faster. For that, you'll be needing stage 2, which is where I'm introducing you to a specially designed exercise called the acceleration chain.